Hello, folks. Welcome to today's Wednesday webinar. I'm Don Graves, and with me today I have Professor Jamie Hopkins, and we're talking about the financial state of the union, how the new presidency impacts retirement income planning. Jamie, welcome aboard, and it's all yours.
Thank you for having me. So I've kind of put up here on the screen kind of this overview of what we're going to cover. At the top, you see it kind of says Keys to Retirement Income Planning. So I kept a lot of the topics that we're going to discuss kind of related to the retirement and retirement income planning discussion. You know, there's a lot of other things, infrastructure, oil, trade, a lot of things that are, part of our financial state of our union. But really my area is retirement income, and so we're going to focus on the things that are most closely related to that. Just at the beginning, give a brief explanation about, who I am, the American College, the RICP designation. Both Don and myself have that. Tom Hegna, who Don mentioned, will be doing another one of these webinars in a couple of weeks, is also part of the RICP program here at the American College. And then I want to go over, I've got about 7 different topics that I think are really in the focus with the new administration coming in, where we might see potential changes. And we'll kind of talk about where we are today with a lot of those programs and policies, and what are some of the ideas that are floating around out there for potential changes. Where might DC be leaning today? And you kind of see that. We're going to talk about interest rates, health insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, child care costs, which that one's probably the most maybe the least related directly to retirement income planning, but I think it's for people in their 30s, 40s, a very important topic. It's kind of keeping them from saving in some areas. Kind of the Department of Labor Fiduciary Rule, what's going to happen there? And that's a question I get every single day now since the election. Talk about Social Security, what's going to be happening with that, and estate planning. And we're probably going to see, more likely changes in some of these areas than others over the next 4 years. And some of them we just know are going to change, like Social Security. We don't know exactly when, exactly how, but it is something that won't be the same in, 16 years as it is today. Then we'll kind of open it up for questions there at the end. On this slide, I just have a picture of myself up there, and Professor David Littell, who's my co-director at our Center for Retirement Income here at the American College. We do research from their video library. And if you haven't been to the videos, it's a great resource for advisors. We've got about, I think, nearing 500 videos now up on our website, free to advisors. You can use them. We actually will give embed links also to people, so you can take that, put that on your own website, or link out to it. And that's all free, available at the American College website under our Center for Retirement Income. They're also available on YouTube. We get a lot of consumers, I guess, that just kind of find them on YouTube. I think that's where most of our views come now on there. And we also, our primary purpose here at the American College is kind of education and taking research, the best practices that are out there, and putting it into our programs to keep it current and practical, especially in our RICP program, the Retirement Income Certified Professional. That's been kind of the hottest program at the college for a while now, and really practical, 3 courses, online, kind of self-study paced. And the American College is a nonprofit accredited degree granting institution. So we are a little bit different. We're not like Kaplan, which is a for-profit entity. We go through the same accreditation as Princeton, as Villanova, other schools in our general area. And so, I mentioned the RICP. As I said, Don and myself both carry that designation, have worked on it. A lot of different experts in there, a lot of people you probably recognize out in the industry, the Michael Kitseys, Wade Fowl, Moshe Milevsky, Tom Hegna, Bill Meyer, Bill Reichenstein, Jack Vanderhei, Mark Warshawski, Mary Beth Franklin, who some of you probably read her stuff over at Investment News. So it's really built with this great arrangement of practitioners, and Don Graves actually has helped us a great deal in the reverse mortgage aspect of the practitioner section. So I told him I'll get his name up on the slide at some point. Just examples of videos and kind of the success of the RICP. Actually nearing 14,000 advisors enrolled currently. About 3,000 have completed it. as to date. So it's been very popular. Only been around for a number 3 years now, and it's kind of the fastest and largest and most enrollments in a year we've seen in the 90 years of the college, more than CFP, CLU, CHFC. So really kind of a growing thing, and that's where the focus is today, right? Retirement income planning, which is driving our discussion here about kind of where are we and where might we be going. Now we're kind of to the core. I'm done my intro stuff. We'll get over here and talk about what you guys came here to talk about, which is this kind of where are we now? For a while we've been kind of sitting around saying, oh, we're going to have this Democratic continuation of the administration, the Department of Labor, the SEC. Yeah, we'll probably have split House and Senate. Then all of a sudden we have a change, and we had our election, and we now have President-elect Donald Trump. And that looks, he's putting his team together as we speak. Transition is in process. We've kind of got a close to divided Senate, but Republican House, and so a lot of kind of the pieces are together to pass legislation, change laws and regulations with the new administration coming into power. Now, this slide, very simple, very straightforward, and this is going to be kind of the theme of most of my discussion. Is this new administration equals new uncertainties, right? That is the crux of all this, and I think most people are probably feeling that. You might feel very optimistic about the future, or you might feel very pessimistic about the future. We have a very divided country right now, and I hope some of those wounds start to heal as we move forward. But one thing we are facing now is definitely uncertainty moving forward. We have what politicians run on as a platform, and then we have what they actually do when they're in office. And looking back over the history of time, we know those things don't always match up. What the politicians say they want to do for you and what you can actually get enacted and completed, two very different things. So right now we're living in a time of uncertainty. We have a lot of rules, regulations, laws that were passed, some of them purely Democratic kind of pushed through maybe 6-7 years ago, some of them a mix, more bipartisan legislation. And, are we going to start scrapping some of those? Are we going to see new regulations or deregulation? What's going to happen? As I said, we're going to look at a variety of different areas, but at least for the next, 6 to 8 months, we're going to be living in a time of uncertainty till we start seeing kind of what's the direction, right? What's the tone? What's the tenure? What are the big picture items? Because all the stuff that gets discussed, Congress just doesn't get that much stuff done in a year. So are we going to see all these things done next year? Absolutely not. It's just not going to happen. Are we going to see a couple major things done the first year of Trump's presidency? Absolutely, right? Pretty much every president you've ever seen, that first year is really important. You often hear about that first 100 days, but for legislation purposes, it's usually that first year that major tax reforms, major health care reforms, that stuff takes more than 100 days. And I know people are working on bills today, but there's a lot of rules in place for kind of proposing legislation, rule changes, the time and notice you have to give, open comment periods. It can take a while. So over the next year, we're going to see changes. And, kind of the first one I want to talk about, we've been hearing about this for a while now, is interest rates. What's happening with interest rates? And, I should say, kind of preface this by, does Congress have control over the Fed? Well, they have some control, over the Fed, but not complete control. It was kind of built to be, kind of report back, and the Treasury Department holds their money, but in a lot of ways kind of independent from the government. So it's kind of this quasi, government agency. And it was kind of built by the government. There is actually specific, statutory language. They've got to report back, but they're kind of on their own. And so, we've seen now for a while, since kind of the economic recovery began here, interest rates have been kept very low from the Fed. So we've seen those, and I threw a couple of them, kind of where they've been around, right? We see the 10-year Treasury down around 2.3%, mortgage car loans somewhere in the high 3s, low 4 range for a while now. And, all these things, these low interest rates and low, savings rates, it really does punish kind of the safe investors, and that's what we've seen for a while. If you want to live off of income, you want to invest in CDs and bonds, it's really hard to do that right now and make it through retirement. So it's putting a lot of pressure on things. It's putting pressure on products too that you might not have thought about that's going to get so hard hit with this. One of the things you look at is long-term care insurance, right? Long-term care insurance has been hit tremendously hard by this continued low interest rate environment. It's caused premiums to skyrocket. Not the only thing that's causing premiums to go up with long-term care insurance. The persistency rates were wrong too. That got fixed a couple years ago, and premiums kept going up. People said, why? Well, part of it was that they didn't project this long kind of time period of low interest rates. Now, what's going to happen? What are we going to see here? Well, we've, Janet, from the Fed Reserve, Yellen, kept saying, well, we're probably, there's no timetable for raising rates. But we've kind of been under this assumption really for about 2 years now that that interest rate rise is coming. Now, I think when people hear that, a lot of people think, well, we're going to go from 4% up to 5% for the 10-year Treasury in a year or two. Well, it might take several years of kind of 0.5% increase or 0.75% increase really to move from that 2.3 maybe up closer to 5% again. So we might not see, I think we're going to see, as a lot of people keep saying and have been saying, December, we're probably going to see a slight rate increase. I think that's possible. I think over the next year, again, I think it's more likely when we start talking about a year from now, we're going to see an increase. Yeah, I think in a year we'll see rates higher than they are today. Again, December might come and go without any significant rate increase. It's not impossible for that to happen. Most people are expecting a small increase. And so what do increasing rates mean, right? Well, it can be good for some areas and bad for others, right? If you're going to start kind of, we get higher rates, you can buy better kind of income for retirement. You can buy better bonds, CDs for income production. But the downside is for borrowers, it becomes a tougher area, right? Higher rates trying to buy homes, and we saw the Schiller Index up very high now too. So it's, in some ways, the high home price and high interest rates, not a great time for home buyers, especially in an area that we're seeing kind of a lagging in home buying now from kind of past generations compared to what the millennials are doing right now. Car loans, credit card, the credit card especially, right? Rates change, credit card rates change almost immediately. So some of those things definitely going to be an impact when we talk about reverse mortgages. Well, again, that's another one. When rates change, we're going to see changes to reverse mortgage rates. So it's, there are immediate impacts here. Now, this is on here not because the president's going to directly change rates, but policies will impact rates too. And so I think just kind of moving forward, you're going to be under this impression that we are going to see rate increases over the next administration. So to be aware of that and what's going to be there. Again, we're not going to see 1-2% increases in December in March, but 0.5% here and there. I think we're going to see that, but it's still going to be a couple years before we're back to 5%. At least that's what most people are thinking. Now, the biggest one, the one that was probably the heart of the campaign here for a lot of the new administration, not just President-elect Trump, but some of the congressmen that were running too, was the Affordable Care Act, or more commonly referred to now as Obamacare. Well, we've seen very high premium increases in certain states. It is still affordable for a lot of people. Where are we going with this? Well, the current system, right, we still have a lot of employer-provided coverage, a tremendous amount of that. We still have exchanges where almost everyone can get insurance. Now, again, the affordability of that, how much it's going to cost, those are different issues. Now, one of the big kind of knocks on the Affordable Care Act from the beginning is really interesting thing, if you look at most of the insurance companies today, what they actually want is actually the kind of the last remaining group of people who are not in the system to get into the health insurance system. And they say one of the ways you could do that is actually make stiffer penalties, that the penalty that's there, kind of our tax for not having health insurance isn't high enough. And I saw that. I had a friend the other day that, looked at the cost and looked at what the penalty was for himself, and he said, for him, he actually is going to make the decision, to go without insurance for this year, because he said, hey, it looks too expensive. I don't want to pay that. I'd rather just pay the penalty and move forward like that. Again, is that the right decision for him? I don't know. It's the decision that he's decided to make. I would probably still say, hey, you should probably get insurance, but there are people making that kind of monetary decision. Well, you could take that away, again, stiffer penalties, and that's what some of the insurance companies want, is to get kind of those healthier younger people into the system. Now, again, the costs of insurance vary greatly by company, by your area where you live. The state's tremendous different costs, state by state. Your income level also has a big impact on your costs for insurance right now. So it's kind of a means-tested and area-tested system right now. And actually, Pennsylvania, where we are, I know we saw some increases here, but it still seems, at least from where I'm working, is okay. I know people in Arizona, you talk to them, and they're very upset about the cost of the Affordable Care Act. And so this was a big thing that people were running on. So we got to change this, right? Got to change the system. Now, kind of the tone right now is, right, is it just, we get rid of this Affordable Care Act, or do we modify it? Or, is it repeal and replace, or repeal, or modification? And I don't think we're exactly there. I mean, Trump very much ran on a platform of repeal, right? We're going to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. A couple of weeks ago, he said, well, we might be keeping some of the features of the Affordable Care Act. And there's certain things I think are going to be hard to go back on. One of the big ones is the pre-existing conditions. I think it's very hard once you start covering people with pre-existing conditions to then back away from that. To go back and say, you know what, we're not going to do that one anymore, right? We're backing away from covering people with pre-existing conditions. I think that's a hard one to sell. So some of the Paul Ryan and other policies I've seen out there are starting to add language in about still covering pre-existing conditions. So what's kind of, as I said, Trump ran on that full repeal of Obamacare, and I put up there, if you go to his website for his campaign, it's still up there, full repeal of Obamacare. But again, just on TV, last week or the week before, saying, they're probably going to keep parts of it. So I think, exactly which parts they're going to keep, not sure. One of the big things you've seen out there is removing some of the limitations on insurance companies from being able to sell kind of across state lines. Now, again, so it's kind of deregulating certain things, so insurance can be more competitive in different states, and it's easier to jump in and jump out of different states from an insurance company standpoint. Again, might that have some impact? Maybe. Another proposal out there is the full deduction of insurance premiums from taxes. Obviously, that would make things more affordable for some people, right? If you can deduct the full cost of your insurance premiums, yeah, that's a big one. Two other things, and we'll get to kind of the last one again, another Trump proposal is to remove some of the federal oversight of Medicaid and kind of let that be more of a state-operated system. And then, again, another thing that President-elect Trump has been pushing was kind of HSAs, that we need to be saving for healthcare costs in tax-efficient manners, one of them kind of being more HSA savings. So could you see something there? Maybe the contribution limits for HSAs go up. Possibility. Again, a lot of the kind of tenor you get here is there might be some tax law change, right? That you might see some deductible changes, some changes to HSA. And so our health savings accounts, and not a lot of people use them today. I love them. I think they're a great vehicle. And I'm glad to hear, right, actually a support for them moving forward. I think they're a great retirement income planning tool, great healthcare savings tool. But again, you need a high deductible plan to use them. And a lot of people, even just the thought of high deductible plans scares them away. But again, kind of depending on your tax rate, how much money you have, if you can afford to pay the high deductible amount, HSAs make a lot of sense. So, that's kind of, where's the Affordable Care Act going? Are we going to see changes there? I think that one I started with, too, because that's probably one of the more likely ones, right? I think it's very unlikely we go through the next year without seeing changes to our insurance system. but those might not actually kick into place until maybe 2018. The insurance, most people have signed up for insurance for next year. It's kind of contractual, so you're probably with that insurance for the next year. Now, what about kind of related to that are Medicare and Medicaid? So what do we know about those two today? Well, Medicare, that's our primary system for retiree health insurance. Medicaid, that's our primary system for paying long-term care expenditures. And that's really a mix of state and federal. As I said, it covers about 73 million Americans today. So a significant group of the American population gets some benefits from this system. Now, Medicaid's very expensive. Covering long-term care costs, very expensive. Medicare, on the other hand, is expensive in the sense that it's a big portion of the United States spending budget, but it's really primarily funded through tax revenue. We have specific taxes that pay for Medicare, paid in part by your employer, in part by yourself. And, it's kind of in a way, a self-funding system, unlike Medicaid, which is kind of funded with more general funding. Now, where might these two systems change? Well, I think the first and biggest one is going to be with Medicare. Medicare changes are probably going to be wrapped up with any reform with the Affordable Care Act. They're probably going to come as a unified change. So we're expecting to see some Affordable Care Act changes the next year, and most likely some Medicare changes are going to come with that. Now, if you start looking again, at what does the Republican Party, what is the new administration talking about? Well, House Speaker Paul Ryan does have a plan around Medicare, which does move to a much more privatized system of Medicare, which is a big change from where we are today. Now, again, the President-elect Trump hasn't yet committed on this idea of privatization of Medicare. So there are divisions within the Republican Party from what the President thinks, what the Senate thinks, and what the House thinks, and actually very big differences between the three of them if you kind of look at it. So a lot of people keep saying, well, we've got a Republican President, Senate, and House, everything's just going to flow through. Well, actually, we have divisions among them. The Senate and the House don't always agree on the policies, especially with some of the tax law changes. We usually get fairly big differences between those two groups. So again, that's something to watch out for. I think kind of probably the full or close to full or privatization that Paul Ryan's talking about probably wouldn't get through the Senate, but some of that is possible. Now, another big area that we've got to watch out for here is the budget issues, and that relates especially true to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. That if we see kind of budget cuts, and the proposed budget cuts that we have seen would hit Medicare and Medicaid significantly. Social Security, I think we're going to see reductions in benefits at some point. I have it up here. I don't think the immediate budget cuts would impact that one so much, but Medicare and Medicaid definitely are probably going to be hit by budget cuts over the next year. We'll see some changes to the program based off of budgeting because they're very expensive programs for the federal government. Now, child care is actually one of the, President-elect Trump's actually clearest plans that he'd set forth. And so what's our current system for child care, and why am I talking about it? Well, child care is very expensive across the country right now, and it does range a lot by state to state. We see that it also has an impact on people's ability to save for retirement, to stay in the workforce. And so we've got our Family Medical Leave Act, but it only protects unpaid leave. It does, and job and benefit protected leave. It's not paid leave. So we see people leaving the workforce, not getting paid, or not even having coverage there. And actually, you have to have 50 or more people in your company even qualify for FMLA. So a lot of small businesses, you don't have to offer anything. You don't even have to protect their job. If they have a kid, you can fire them, get rid of them. And a lot of people are surprised about that. Not only is there not any paid leave, but you actually don't even have to protect their job if they want to leave for family caregiving. I think that's a surprise to a lot of people. So we don't have that, but a lot of companies offer leave, and PwC, Bank of America are two that come up. Very big companies have phenomenal leave programs for both the males and females. Even for adoptions, they've got leave policies in place. So a lot of good things there. And then some states have very good, kind of family leave and child care plans in place. New Jersey's one that has a modified disability program for moms have a child and can get leave there that's paid. So again, while the federal government's not in place for all these areas, some states and companies have taken on this. So often I hear, this comment. They say, oh, well, look at what other countries offer as paid leave, and the United States offers nothing. Well, in reality, in practical sense, that's not true at all. A lot of people in the United States actually do have paid leave. It's just not mandatory from the federal government. So, people in New Jersey, paid leave. People at PwC, Bank of America, large companies, paid leave. So you do have some of that here, even though it's not federally mandated. Now, again, a lot of people still have no paid, and some people have no protected leave at all. Then we get to the cost of care. I think one of the very interesting things, I pulled some Pennsylvania stats here. That says average care for a kind of infant, a child, is about $10,000 a year. Right around Philadelphia, though, it's closer to the $18,000, $19,000. Which is about 15 to 20% of average family income in Pennsylvania, and actually that's the $10,000 range, so it'd be about $30,000 or 30% of average family income if you're at the $19,000. And so actually federal kind of stats say, well, that makes child care affordable to only about 27% of the population of Pennsylvania. So if you look at that, they say, well, that's really not affordable for most people. And so Trump's plan actually, looked at a lot of this and said, okay, so what are we going to do for this? Well, he actually did provide a plan that would modify our disability insurance policies in the United States and really make that work so people with would get 6 weeks of paid leave. Now, that policy actually only went to mothers, so sorry, men out there, the new policy actually wouldn't impact you. No husbands under Trump's original proposal would get any additional benefits here. But for the mom, there would be at least 6 weeks of paid leave by revamping the disability policies in place out there. So that's an interesting one, very specific on how it would be done. Now, Trump also talked about, and on his website and the plans that he put out there, said, well, a couple other things we can do. One is to open up tax deductions for child care. Now, one of the interesting things about that is it really would only benefit a small group of people. It would benefit actually fairly high net worth individuals that are paying for this care. Now, not only them, but when you kind of look at who is paying federal taxes, and you see, okay, well, a large portion of the country actually doesn't pay federal taxes, can't even deduct this, right? So even if we give them this deduction, they're not going to use it because they have enough deductions, they're not paying federal income tax. And so this would actually really only hit a smaller group of people, mostly a wealthier group of individuals. But again, it is a very specific policy that was proposed out there, creating kind of a new child care savings account similar to like an HSA account, but for child care savings, opening that up to a broader. So kind of thinking about, tax efficient ways to save. And then, kind of more generally announce providing incentives for employers to provide child care on their premises. So maybe you could see, again, a tax deduction for child care services provided from an employer. Maybe you could take the average cost of care in your area or what you actually spend and deduct it from income from a corporation or company. That proposal wasn't as specific with that one, but I think that's probably really the only way you could encourage that from a tax perspective is really to offer the company some type of deduction. You usually don't offer a credit for offering that, so see some type of deduction in that world. Now, the big one I said I get questions on every day, right? The Department of Labor Fiduciary Rule. So where are we today? Well, the rule was passed back in April. It was published in the Federal Register in April and actually became effective in June 2016. So that's very important because this rule is actually in place today. You don't have to comply with it till April 2017, but the rule itself is on the books. It's a rule. It's a law. So the president cannot unilaterally just end this. There are a couple things that can be done, though. And again, this fiduciary rule, right, is a big deal because it kind of makes everyone providing financial advice, right? If you're providing financial advice to an IRA, distributions, rollovers, I mean, if you're providing financial advice as a financial planner, you're a fiduciary moving forward, right? Now, you might have an exemption to be able to keep your commissions and behave in certain transactions, but you're a fiduciary. And we've got to start complying by that April, and then at the end of the year 2017, kind of full compliance. There's a bunch of lawsuits challenging this. I think we've seen about 4 now kind of go through the initial process and lose on the injunction. Losing on the injunction basically is a death sentence for these challenges. If there are courts saying you don't even deserve an injunction today, well, they're all going to get past April before any actual decisions made, so in some ways it doesn't even matter because you're going to have to comply by it. And that's the big thing, right, is if we get to April and everybody has to create systems to comply with this by April, that's kind of the end of everything, right? There's not a whole lot else to go back on at that point. So that's a very interesting thing. Now, Trump's advisors have come out publicly and said, they're against the Department of Labor rule. We've got a lot of different industry people saying they're against it. Well, how do you get rid of it? Well, 2 to 3 different ways to go. One, we could still see a court case throw it out. It's looking incredibly unlikely that's going to happen, and incredibly unlikely it's going to happen by April. So you can kind of throw that one. Yeah, it's still a possibility, but we're probably talking about less than a 10% probability there of anything occurring. Then you say, well, Congress could end the rule. That's the clearest way to do it, that Congress passes a law, President signs it, it ends the fiduciary rule. Now, they can do that, okay? And we've seen a couple of them actually go to President Obama, and he's vetoed them. And he says it's not going to happen. So it's not going to happen between now and end of January, basically. We're not going to see that. So we've got, then you're looking at, well, February and March. Now, as a company, as an industry, do we want to be waiting to February and March for something we have to comply to in April before we start making changes? Well, maybe not. I know there are still some companies out there holding out, hoping, but that's going to be getting a little risky. If you're not compliant, you're in big trouble then come April. If you're doing things that are prohibited transactions to all of your clients and you're 0% compliant with this rule, that basically shut down your company. And lawsuits if you're not compliant by then. So we've got to get compliant by then. And I think everyone's got to keep moving forward like the rule is going to be in place. Another opportunity here is they could go back to the Department of Labor as when President Trump's in office and say, look, Department of Labor, I need you to make a new rule. By making a new rule, though, it's going to take time. And it's unlikely you'd have a new rule. Well, actually, it's almost impossible to have a new rule because of the time periods required for notice and comment by April. So it's looking like, do I think this rule is going to get modified over the next year? I actually do. Is there still a good chance that Congress passes something February, March to halt the rule? I think there's a chance of that. But it's not real clear that we very well could still see the Department of Labor rule come April. And you've got, you'll hear people say both sides of this right now. Some people think it's absolutely going to be there, and some people think that this is a high priority item. Congress is going to pass something and halt it. So we've got to wait and see. But it's law today, so we've really got to get ready for the future with it. I've also heard people talk about defunding it. You might have heard that too. If you hear people talking about defunding the rule, that Congress will pass a budget thing and it'll just basically not allow any funding for it. Actually, that's useless, doesn't do anything. This rule was built by the Department of Labor to not really require any funding. They're not going to enforce it. The plaintiffs' attorneys are going to enforce this rule, so they don't need any funding. So the idea of using a budget bill to defund this rule really won't stop it. So that's kind of off the table, even though I keep hearing people talk about that. It's really not a reality as a way to stop this rule. So again, we're kind of working forward. This is the law today. So to overturn this, we have to have a new Department of Labor rule, court decision saying it's unconstitutional, illegal, or some congressional act. So again, we'll wait and see where that goes. But today, you still got to move forward as the rule's in place, and we've got to comply with it. Next one is Social Security. I'm going to start this by saying we will see Social Security change at some point. I personally don't believe it's going to be in the next 4 years. I do not believe the next administration and president is going to take the time to make the significant changes to Social Security that it needs. Why? Because if you look at what government has done over the past 100 years, we do not fix problems that are 18 years down the road. We don't. And you might say, no, Social Security's problem today. Well, it is and it isn't. Social Security in 2016 will grow. The fictional fund, as I on here, is still growing. Interest plus kind of tax revenue is still more than what we pay out of the system. So today, it's not a losing program. It's still growing. When does the program, kind of 2018, it really starts going downhill? So we got about 2 years before kind of it's actually more expensive than what we're bringing in for it. Now, the problem is that we really don't run out of money to be able to pay this until about 2034, 2033, 2035. It'll be in that range. That's a long time from now. And the government tends to not fix problems that are that far out in the future. This is a major overhaul when we get here. We've seen proposals, though. Bernie Sanders actually has the clearest proposal out there on Social Security changes. He's actually run it all the way through kind of the finance and budgeting and all that. And so we know very specific details. He actually has a proposed bill. We haven't seen that from a Republican side yet about how to overhaul Social Security, at least not in a long time. So, we are going to see Social Security run out of money at some point, not be able to meet all of its promised benefits. Again, even with the income that we get from it, and how is that funded? Well, it's basically a 12.4% tax. That's your largest tax, really, is Social Security. That's the primary expenditure of the United States government. You probably have heard before that military is. It's not even close. Social Security and Medicare are overwhelmingly the #1 expenditure of the federal government. The only thing is we have specific taxes that go to them, but they are the overwhelming majority of federal government expenditures is Social Security and Medicare. It's not military. Military is next, but it is Social Security and Medicare as a system. They're funded with specific taxes. So in a math problem sense, there's a very easy way to fix underfunding. You change the taxes. Taxes move up. You fix the underfunding problem. Now, again, just raising taxes is not always the best solution because that has impacts elsewhere. People stop spending money on other things. We're diverting assets from growth and things into this system. So, again, is that the only change we're going to see? No. Most Americans, we've seen a lot of surveys on this, actually are okay with increased taxes if they know it's going to go directly to Social Security fund and cannot be used for other things. So we could see at some point some type of lockbox idea, which became a joke for a while, but actually having the money go into a specific fund for Social Security that can't be used for other things. It's probably the right thing to do. Whether or not we'll see it, is a different issue. Now, what has Trump talked about with Social Security? He actually doesn't have quite a full plan here. He's got kind of more sound bites as right now. As I said, the Social Security thing, you really only have one person that kind of has a current and full plan, and Bernie Sanders proposed that earlier this year into Congress. It's not going anywhere. I don't think his plan would get enacted, but he has one. So Trump has actually talked about a couple interesting things. One is actually probably means testing for Social Security, which means higher net worth individuals actually lose benefits, will be taken away. Very interesting idea there of means testing Social Security. There's a little bit of that today with the earnings test, but Trump's talked about that a number of times now, actually, that people like him, wealthier individuals, don't need Social Security, so why are they getting it? He's also said a number of times it's a deal, it's a contract that the American people have entered into with the federal government. It needs to be honored. So he's actually been a fairly strong supporter of Social Security and kind of keeping it in place, reducing it for some higher net worth individuals. How does he, has been asked, how would you fix the shortfall in the future? Well, he said basically reposition taxes going to other areas into Social Security, specifically he said foreign aid. If you look at that as a percentage of spending, it really wouldn't have much of an impact, though. So again, what are some of the other changes we're likely to see in Social Security? Increase full retirement age. Almost everyone agrees with that one. We'll probably move that up 67, 68. I think the one that people are a little bit more on the fence about is moving the retirement age period up from 62. That would be a big one. I think that needs to come on the table. Some other things, changing the taxes, how that's allocated, maybe expanding out. Right now you're taxed on your taxable wage base, Social Security taxable wage base, which is going up pretty significantly to the, kind of later $128,000, somewhere right around there for next year. Pretty big increase from this last year. I think it was about $9,000 increase. Pretty big increase there, but again, expanding that out further, and that's really what Bernie Sanders had proposed for changing Social Security. Estate planning. Today we have an estate federal state tax, it's close to a 40%. That's the highest rate, but close to a 40% tax on a state's for couples over, roughly $11 million. You don't need to start worrying about it till you have more money than that. What we see is this impacts today about 2 out of every 1,000 estates get impacted by the federal estate tax. So a very, very small percentage of individuals have to pay federal estate tax. Now, you might have state inheritance tax or state estate tax, different things. On the East Coast, you're more likely to run into that. As you move west, they kind of go away. So even when states tend to be subject to this, even though the rate is 40%, we're seeing about less than a sixth of the estates actually get paid out into taxes. So you're looking at something closer to 18% kind of effective tax on estates subject to the federal estate tax. Now, kind of the next part is, will this go away? I think this is, this is one that, we sit around here at the college as we teach estate planning, as the CFP has a big portion of estate planning, and it's based around the federal estate tax. I think there's a very good possibility we're going to see this go away, at least for a time period. This gets proposed every single year by Republicans, and we've seen it drop off for a year. Actually, when Steinbrenner passed away, we saw it go away, saved the Yankees family, a couple $100 million in taxes. And I think we could see this go away again. We've seen that this is definitely something that's kind of on the table. It impacts so few people that people are usually not terribly upset about this issue one way or another. Where does what's kind of the purpose of this? Where does the money go? Well, we see most of the money today actually is going towards healthcare and national defense. So a cut to this would mean basically a budget cut to those, or repositioning finances. Why was this built? Well, really, this was built to kind of stop the kind of family concentration of wealth. It was actually kind of enacted back when you can think about like Great Gatsby, and you had these families that were accumulating wealth. And we decided as the U.S. that we wanted to stop that we were not going to have multi-generations of just kind of sitting on wealth, that we want that wealth to be redispersed back into the system. And that's why this was created. If you looked at a lot of countries, not just the United States, have moved this way of having a estate tax. And actually, kind of income for the federal government, U.S. revenue from the estate tax is kind of actually one of the lowest in the world. So we talk about this one a lot here, but if you move to other countries, now not every country, Australia has no estate tax at all. We were just with some people from Australia the other day. They have no estate tax. Now, some countries have gone that route, and some are actually much more kind of driven in the redistribution of wealth. So again, interesting stuff. And those are really kind of the big areas moving forward, right? We're thinking about changes to healthcare. We're thinking about changes to Medicare, Medicaid. We're thinking about changes to kind of child care, college costs, because that's really hindering people's financial futures today. And I have very clear plans on that side. I think we'll see some changes there. I think we'll see some bipartisan legislation, a lot of agreement actually in that area in D.C. So I think we're likely to see some changes there. As I said, Social Security, while one of our more important issues, we might not see anything over the next 4 years. I think that'll become a bigger issue in the next election cycle, and people will be talking about that. It's a lot of work, a lot of political capital would have to be expended there. Definitely not a year one issue in the presidency. We're going to see kind of health care still being pushed forward, and some of the kind of specific tax rules might get overhauled. And also the estate taxes, I think that's on the chopping block. We're likely to see that get axed here. Again, it impacts so few people. It's been scaled back to about 11 million. There was a time period when that was under $1 million per individual for a state tax exemption in the 90s, $600,000, $1 million. It impacts a lot more people at that point. Where it's getting to today is kind of just impacting, as we said, 2 out of every 1,000 estates, very small amount of people actually impacted by that. So, that kind of wraps up my area of coverage here, kind of where we're going, what we're going to see. As I said, kind of the main takeaway, though, is that we don't know exactly what's going to happen. There are divisions between what the president wants, what the House wants, and what the Senate wants. Now, in some areas, I think there's, as I said, there's a little bit more agreement in D.C. when you talk about some child care and health care changes. I think there's agreement that both of them need changes. Now, I think the specifics of those need to be ironed out. I think things like doing Social Security now, too big of a divide right now in how people want to fix the system to see major changes over the next year. We're going to see interest rates start creeping up over the next couple years. We've been historically low. I think we'll see the Fed start to release some of the restrictions, especially if the stocks are up where they were this last couple weeks. I think that's a positive sign for the economy. Jobless rates have been down, so we're kind of seeing, are we strong enough now to kind of start experiencing some higher inflation, some higher interest rates? So, Don, I know you're around, but yeah, we have this just kind of a list of things from the top of other resources. I'll kind of click through. There's 2 ebooks we have here from myself. Actually published them with Forbes. If you're interested in them, we could always get that to you. And I want to thank people. We can also probably answer some questions here, if any came in, and kind of tackle those. So, Don, I don't know if we get any questions here.
I don't think we asked people for questions yet, but folks, on the right-hand side of your panel, there's a place for questions. They'll take about 60 seconds to 2 minutes once you type them in to get to Jamie and I. So go ahead and type them now. And Jamie, can you go back to the slide, maybe it was your first one that just gave the overall, the seven things you wanted to talk about. I just want to go back to the overview slide.
Absolutely. We'll get there. I do see one question in here
Yep.
that I think Andrew asked about, can Congress require an additional study to delay kind of the rule? Well, the thing about the Department of Labor rule, it's actually already gone through that study. So if they were to do something like that, they would actually need to get a full, like they couldn't just do that internally in like a committee meeting. They'd actually have to pass a full law to do that, to delay it. And at that point, if you can kind of get that all the way through, you could probably just get a kill the DOL rule all the way through. There are times you can just throw those additional studies, but that's when a rule is still kind of in a committee inside regulatory body. Once they've already gone through the rulemaking, they've already done that study and published it. So the Department of Labor is kind of past that point. But and someone brought up here too, what about HECMs? I would say, Don and I have talked about this, and it's come up a couple times. So the reverse mortgage HECM, funded, in part by the federal government, I don't think that's a year one concern. 2017, well, we might see some modifications, and we see proposed rule things. Yeah, it's possible we might see some changes. The axing of the program really not on the table next year. Now, if you're looking at a way to scale back, to cut back costs, it actually does cost the federal government money to run the program. It's not a self-funding program, even though there's the trust fund there, and we talk about that. It is actually a financial loser for the federal government. They do fund part of this. And so if you start looking around at programs that they could cut, well, that program in one sense is like accounting dust to the federal government. It's really small, and actually what it takes them to fund it as a percentage is almost nothing, right? You wouldn't even be able to find it on a pie chart of federal government expenditures. But it's not impossible that a program like that could get the axe at some point and just say, hey, look, private world, deal with reverse mortgages. You can offer a product. We're not going to back it with insurance. Again, not a 2017 issue, but it is something to watch kind of moving forward. And Don, yeah, we had, well, I'll answer one more question. Say, what about income taxes, right? Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these things have direct kind of implications on taxes, right? I always say, looking at just income taxes is kind of a misnomer. We kind of have to look at our effective tax rate. because what's Social Security, what's our Medicare tax? Well, yeah, we could cut income taxes by 5–10%, but if we increase Social Security taxes by 5%, it really didn't change anything. We're at the same point we were from an effective tax rate. A lot of people are expecting to see income tax rates probably first to corporations. I think the corporate tax rates are going to get modified. I do think we'll see some more deductions and maybe some drops in the upper echelon of income tax rates, so we can see that get pulled back a little bit. That's definitely, kind of a big, drawing point and standing point for the Republican Party is to pull back the taxes, cut back government spending in certain areas, which often requires the reduction or elimination of certain programs.
Jamie, the question came up. Now I'm going to read them just for the people who are listening. How would the privatization of Medicare differ from the current system of a federal system for Medicare recipients? More expensive, ? Less coverage. That's from Diane.
Yes. So at least from the stuff that I've seen so far, is again, Medicare today, the government kind of repositions funding to there. So if you look at it that way, from a out-of-pocket dollar standpoint, it probably gets more expensive, and you probably do take away some of the kind of coverage options that are available today. So it probably does become a little bit more expensive, and kind of if you're thinking about directly from the consumer side, and less kind of coverage. That's probably what privatization means there. If we privatize it, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. But again, a lot of those things are, kind of dependent on what restrictions the government puts in place for it. It's really is hard to say on that one. I think that most kind of academics and people who really pay attention to that world are not big fans of privatizing Medicare or Social Security. Because we can go back to before we had those systems. We had to bring those systems in place because people weren't doing a good job, on taking their wealth and turning it into guaranteed income through retirement, and having the right insurance coverage in retirement. And so, kind of without the right protections in place there, we fall back to what we knew was before that system, right? Those systems haven't always been here. So we actually do understand what it was like before. Now, has the world changed since then? Yes. Maybe have we learned things since then? Yes. But we kind of know behaviorally people don't do a great job on those things, which is why we've kind of always been okay with some inefficiencies in these systems. But Medicare is run, Medicare and Social Security, because of the actual vastness of them, are run very efficiently. I know people don't always feel that way, but Medicare is run incredibly efficiently from a kind of admin standpoint and coverage standpoint, because insurance works best when you have almost everyone in a system. And we have basically everyone in the system. Same thing with Social Security. So kind of the kind of scaling there is phenomenal, and actually run fairly efficiently from a cost standpoint.
So Jamie, we've got 2 or 3 minutes left. You sent me a copy of the slide deck. Would it be okay if I converted that to PDF, or is there a link where these can be on the American College site and I can just send the link out?
Yeah, probably the best thing, we can probably just do a conversion and send out the PDF if you want. That's probably there's these aren't up at a specific link right now, but we're happy to get them to people if they want them. And then I think someone asked again the books. You should be able to find them. Probably the easiest way, if you're interested in the eBooks, they're both very cheap. They're like $3 or $4. They're actually created originally to kind of be used, kind of for clients. We did have a couple places that have bought 1,000 of them and kind of delivered them out to clients when possible. So there's a retirement risks one, and both of these are written within the last year, so they're kind of up to date on laws, including the Social Security changes, and then this 10-step retirement planning one. If you kind of Google my name or put them into Amazon, you find them on there. That's an easy way to find them, actually.
Fantastic. Folks, we're at the 2 o'clock hour. I'm going to stop the recording now. Jamie Hopkins, I'd like to thank you for being my guest today, the Retirement State of the Union. So video will be recorded, sent out to people along with a link. I'll convert it and upload it, folks. So you should get a link to a Dropbox, and you'll be able to go and pull it down there if you like. So Jamie, thanks again. Have a wonderful holiday season. Those still on the call, December 14th, Wednesday, same time, Tom Hegna will talk about the 7 strategies retirement income planners need to have or embrace for 2017. The person who invited you to this webinar, just circle back to them and say, I want to be a part of that. And or if I invited you, just email me and you'll get a link. So that's up now for you to register. Jamie, thanks again. Everyone, take care. Bye now.